of experts. We would suggest that as you move forward, that you would use your local architects. You have 3 architects in town to be your local building experts. We'd also suggest that you would combine those with the principal from each school who lives in the school, knows it intimately, as well as members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, all of your representatives. This group then will gather the information that's needed to begin your planning work. Existing facility analysis. The school district has great information about the physical needs of all your facilities, O&M costs, energy costs, demographic studies, other relevant planning. What I mean by other relevant planning is that the city may be doing some planning, say, for housing starts that may have some influence on school choices and school sites. The next step is to discuss who will evaluate the building. And step 3 is when the building level meetings begin. And from my perspective, this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of involving the community. So the question is, who will be involved in in evaluating these buildings? And there's really 2 sets of groups that we would suggest that you consider. First of all, there are planned, what we would suggest, what has been effective in the past, is 2 meetings at each building. That's a lot of meetings. At the first meeting, you would like it to be an open call, actually both meetings, an open call to the public in general to attend the building that is personally relevant to them. It would be nice if people could attend every meeting, but as you can do the math, that's a lot of meeting. Typically what happens is that people select a building that's personally relevant. They live in that boundary, their kids go to that school, they went to that school, their parents went to the school, some reason that building is relevant to them, they would attend that meeting. They have interest in that building. And it could be the whole series of elementary school, middle school, and high school. I've seen people do that. So that's the first half of the group that would be involved in evaluating the buildings. The second half of the group would be the professional team of experts that I mentioned before. That's your local architects, your principal, and then your members of the Citizens Advisory Committee for your various groups, buildings and grounds, curriculum and instruction, finance, and technology. This provides some continuum of planning. These groups have already been involved in planning. That's who'd be involved. Now, how does it happen? The first building, as I mentioned, is the building walkthrough, the literal walkthrough. And the purpose of the building level meetings is to develop a prioritized list of needs for that building that can be considered as part of the overall planning. So what would happen? At this meeting, people would show up in a large assembly space like this. They'd get a brief introduction. They would be given an evaluation sheet. Some of the questions on the evaluation sheet will already have been answered. Their job will be to walk through the building and answer the questions, evaluate the building in those areas that are not yet answered. They will return to the group following their building tour. When they return, they will be joined by members of this professional team that I've mentioned. What will happen is that professional team will have gone prior to that meeting and answered questions that required them to go outside, because I wouldn't suggest that you ask people to go outside in an evening. They're also going to review the things that require professional expertise, like, is the building structurally stable? That's really a question for the professionals. So together, collaboratively, you will finish the evaluation at each building and present the prioritized needs as you see it at the end of the first meeting. At the second meeting, your local architects will introduce the meeting. They will have put costs to the things that you identified as priorities in the first meeting. That gives you the tools to determine what really is a priority. You see, I know that the sauna in the teacher's lounge or the climbing wall in the lounge sounded like a real important priority. But once you see the cost, you realize maybe there are better ways that we would spend our money. So at the second meeting, at the end of the second meeting, what you will have is a prioritized list of needs for that building with costs. That then gives us the information for each and every one of your school buildings. Now it's time to look at them collectively and to determine what our needs are as a district. And the way we suggest that you consider doing that is through a cost-benefit analysis. We want to compare how well the buildings function with their life cycle costs. Not just the first cost, not just the cost of renovation, but life cycle costs. Life cycle costs include the first cost of renovation or additions or construction. They include the cost of building renewal. Buildings are comprised of systems with predictable lifespans, so we know when they should be expected to fail, so you can plug in a cost to review those or to repair those. O&M costs and energy costs. And that gives you the tools to do a cost-benefit analysis. I want to show you one example that was done for a similar school district that had 26 facilities. What we did is we created a numerical ratio of the life cycle cost to the educational benefit. You'll remember that I said that the educational evaluation will give you a numerical score. So we created a ratio of the life cycle cost to the educational benefit. And then we charted it, and then we charted the average of all of the scores. This red line indicates the average of all 26 facilities. The facilities you see in red have a higher than average cost per benefit ratio. In other words, you spend more on those facilities. The facilities below this line have a lower than average cost to benefit ratio. This helped this school district get their arms around what facilities they should be looking at and for renovation or perhaps for retiring. It would be great if you could boil this all down to a mathematical equation, but you can't, and this is a great example. Two of these facilities were two of the oldest facilities in the city, in this particular school district. They were deeply woven into the fabric of the community, those two facilities. That the school district had the highest support from schools in these communities. They were high-performing schools. The school district said, we recognize that it's going to cost more to renovate these facilities, but the benefit to us goes beyond educational adequacy. It has to do with support for the school district. So two of these facilities they decided to reinvest in, acknowledging that the costs were higher than they were at other facilities. Three of these facilities ended up being retired. This was a declining enrollment school district. Two of them are currently still in use. So the outcome, the last step in the process, is the development of the plan. That will include a summary, a description of the criteria that was used to evaluate the facilities, the costs that were used, the analysis that helped develop the conclusions, and then the identification of needs. Essentially, the report should define the problem to be solved in the next step, and that's the development of program solutions. The report should also include graphic analysis that lets you see at a glance how the various schools compare. Here's an example. This is two schools. The two rows on the right represent schools. In the facility evaluation tool, there is a numeric score of how well something performs. If it's absent, if it's very inadequate, if it's poor, if it's more borderline. And we key the score. The worse the score, the darker the color. So the goal in your facilities master plan would be to take the dark red and to turn it to a lighter shade of red or to remove the color altogether. So you can see that the school on the far right has much more issues to deal with than the school on the far left. And that's just an example of some of the graphic analysis. The next step in our program tonight is the small group work, as usual. What we'd like you to do tonight is to review the evaluation tool that's in all of your packets. We want you, I mentioned there will be a numerical score and weighting, but for the purposes of tonight's meeting, we want you to focus on content, not on that, on content. Are we reviewing, examining the things that should be examined at your school? So, to lead you through that process, I'd like to turn it over to the community chair.
Just a reminder, in your packet